Japan has approved a record 115 trillion yen budget for the fiscal year of 2025, and that's the equivalent of 731 billion US dollars. And you won't believe where 33% of the entire budget goes to. Or maybe you will once I tell you what it is. Well, they just approved it on December 27th. And this budget is planned for the fiscal year of 2025, which is starting in April. So this is a record budget for Japan, but it's not a complete deviation from past years. So in the fiscal year 2024, they had a 112 trillion yen budget. So it's not completely ridiculous, but it is their biggest budget yet. And a lot of that budget is going into just simply one thing, which is social security spending. And what is the reason for that? Well, it is Japan's aging population. So I wanted to bring up this graph right here because it shows an interesting story of Japan's history. So this was back in 1950, and this shows how many people were being born or were living through various ages. And this period right here shows a growth period. So if we look at this chart right here, it shows how to look at the growth of a country or the collapse of a country through population. So the first two right here shows expansion. So if we look at this graph right here, you can see the expansion. But if we start to play through the years, we can start to see how it starts to contract at the younger ages. There's not as much people in that young generation from 0 to 10 years old, and it keeps on shifting. And as we go through these years, you can see how the population just starts to bubble out. The entire population is just getting older and older. So by the time you hit where you are right now, most of the people alive, or a significant portion of them, are in the older years. And these are the people who are starting to exit the workforce. They're not producing as much as they used to, and they still have to be cared for. So this is where all of that social security spending is going to, is this aged population. And that's why a third of the entire budget is literally just going to social security spending. Now, if we look at other areas, we also have defense spending, which is 8.5 trillion yen, which is about 7.4% of the entire budget. And then you also have things like bonds, where this is the first time in 17 years where new bonds are being kept under 30 trillion yen. Now, despite these efforts, the government debt will still account for a quarter of this total spending. Now, one thing that I'm really interested in is this regional development, which is something that I really do think that Japan needs a lot of. Because similar to the population problem, it leaks out into the rest of the country. So one thing that has happened a lot in Japan is basically centralizing populations. So for example, Tokyo, the most populous city in the entire world, a large percent of people simply live in Tokyo. And another reason for that is because you have a lot of the younger population from smaller regions who want to do something more with their lives, and Tokyo is the place to go and try and do that. So in those smaller regions, you might have that aged population where some people just aren't as productive as they used to be, and then you don't have as many young people in that area to actually develop the land. So you have a lot of these dying regions, these small town communities in Japan that are just slowly fading out as more and more people move to urban areas. So this regional development, it could be a very good thing for Japan, because I really do think that some of the best places in Japan are these lesser known areas, but they do need work. They need a community who is able to support the area and possibly also build up the area for tourism. So for example, Kyoto is one place that's very small town feeling, but it's a massive tourist hub. Now, a lot of that does come from the history of Kyoto, but if you have other regions within Japan and they're able to give you that same small town feel while also giving you a new and unique experience, you could pull some of those people back to those regional areas. Now, that's just me thinking about it. I don't know what their actual plan is. So as it says here, they've doubled the tax grants to 200 billion yen to revitalize this regional growth. So if you're a traveler to Japan, some parts of this budget, they really won't affect you, but this regional development could be very interesting for future growth of Japan. Being able to decentralize from the major cities and build up the regional areas to allow more people to experience the beauty of Japan in different areas rather than just the tourist trap areas. Because let's be honest, tourism is becoming a massive problem in Japan, especially in these places that are the common tourist traps, because everyone goes there. Everyone who visits Japan goes to these same places, and if more regional development could get people to go away from the really big central hubs and go out into the more regional area, it could be much healthier for Japan, remove congestion away from these big developed hubs and go out into the regional areas, which I do think a lot of the best parts of Japan are more in these regional areas. Because if you just go to Tokyo, you're only going to get like a washed up version of cultural Japan. So this is something to keep an eye on and see how these regional developments could change the future of Japan.